welcome to Paperback Flicks.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Paperback Flicks. I am Ruth Craddock,
I'm Rae Davidson.
and today we are talking about the book by Stephen King, The Body slash the movie Stand By Me, made in this year by this director. And yeah, so Ray, so I think you said last time you hadn't seen this movie before?
Correct. I'd never seen it. I apparently I have not even read Stephen King stuff except for what we've done for the podcast. So,
Okay, cool. This is our fourth Stephen King. So we had, or you know what, not my fourth Stephen King, I think. So I've read The Stand, I've read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, I've read Firestarter for this, and I've read um Stand By Me or The Body.
Mhm.
Did we do Stephen King before Firestarter, or was it the first one?
I don't think so. I think that was the first one.
Okay, all right, so I guess it's only the second. Sorry. This is the second Stephen King we've done so far. I guess that makes sense because this is only our, what season is this?
Three?
Season three? Yeah. I don't know. I just work here. I'm definitely getting more into the Stephen King as we do this. I think maybe we should just keep doing. He has a lot of work, so it'd be easy. And a lot of them have been made into movies. So it'd
Yeah.
be fairly easy to do a lot of Stephen King. But
Yeah. And I like that this is not a tradition, kind of Firestarter too. It's not traditional horror. Like when I think of Stephen King, I think of Carrie and I think of Cujo and I think, The Shining. But I like that like people are like, oh, he just does horror. And this is kind of like Firestarter was a little bit mind-bendy, and this one, like, I like this. It makes you think, and there is like a creepy element, but it's not just like scary, you know what I mean?
yeah.
I like it.
I like this. This is a coming of age stories. I like these stories that have to do with like the 11, 12, 14, 15, that kind of middle area where they're not quite, they're just barely teenagers and
Hmm.
they're not children anymore, but they're kind of like, it's that kind of awkward, unusual phase where a lot of things change for children, and especially in these small town kind of environments, middle America. I love the 1950s, 1960s era. I love stories set in this time period, especially in America. 'Cause I'm American and, I like Americana. Anyways, and I love the cars. I love the 1960s cars. I'm a big classic car freak. That's what I am. Um, Not like insanely, but I will like hoot and holler and catcall at any classic car that I see on the road. I have other people do that for hot women or good-looking guys. I do it for cars. So yeah. Anyways, so I enjoy this. I do like this kind of story, especially when it's so this is based off of true events, and he went and fictionalized it and like changed everybody's names and made it, kind of tweaked it a little bit, but it is based off of his childhood and something that did occur to Stephen King when he was younger. So I find that very fascinating, and I like that a lot. I think it's a lot of fun. Um, it kind of makes you sit there and go, how much of this is based off reality and how much is this him stretching things and
Yeah.
making them more dramatic and interesting? Um, so yeah, what'd you think of the book?
So one thing that kind of grabbed me, like when it was like, oh, I forgot the kid's name, but he runs up and he's like, "Hey guys, want to see a dead body?"
For
And
yeah.
I'm like, that was so a boy thing. Like I understand that there might be girls out there that also like fall in line with this,
Mhm,
but like I was like I would never like we might talk about it when I was in junior high or whatever,
mhm.
but no, I'm not gonna camp out with my friends and go like hike through the woods for a day to see a corpse. Like that's not a thing that I would even think like let's do it. Like
Yeah. Yeah, even well, what's funny is like definitely kids nowadays would definitely not do this kind of thing. Even in our days, though, like that was still kind of like, and we had a lot more freedom and we were a lot more outdoorsy than kids today. Our kids today are very like homebodies, inside people, and their tablets and their little devices and their phones, and they're not typically they're not very outdoorsy. They're not adventurous. The closest thing to adventure they know is a video game. They are not the types to actually go out and do this kind of stuff on their own. So like it's one thing to go camping with your family or with like a trusted adult, an uncle or a father or a mother, somebody like that. It's another thing to go with a group of other 12-year-old kids
Right.
who are equally as inexperienced in survival as you and hope that you're not gonna die. I mean, it's the woods. It's not like they're wandering through like regular towns.
Right.
If they're walking through towns, it would be different. Like there'd be places to stop and get a drink of water or like there'd be shade and stuff like that. They wouldn't be their worst thing to have to worry about is people and somebody being like, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" If they
Right.
were going through neighborhoods or towns, you know what I mean? But going to the woods, you don't know what the heck is in the woods. Especially back then, it's even more wild than it is now.
Yeah.
I
And it
mean,
might have been a small town, but they were still city boys. Like they were still like townies, you
they're
know?
town people, yeah. They
Yeah.
weren't country folk per se.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought the whole concept, like even I don't know, I might go camping in someone's backyard. Like that might be a thing that I do,
Hmm.
but it was the ruse to go see the body. Like to me,
Yeah.
like my story ends before it even gets started because I'm in a playhouse and I'm or clubhouse or whatever, and I'm playing with my friends, and someone's like, "Want to see a dead body?" I'm like, "No."
No, I don't want to be a dead body.
Right.
So,
Right.
no. Yeah. And so it's interesting in that fact that it's very different notion than the kind of things that most people, especially nowadays, would want to go and do with their friends.
Mhm.
So it definitely speaks to how much more wild and like unsupervised kids were at the time that this even worked. That they could say to one parent, "Oh, we're camping out in the Vern's lot behind his house," and all they had to do was leave a flashlight in the tent, and the mom thought they were still there. She didn't
Right.
go out to check.
Right.
She didn't go offer them any food because we know the boys didn't take any food with them. They all realized that once they were on the flippin' road. "Oh yeah, did you bring food? I didn't bring food. Did you bring food? I brought a comb." That's the movie. The
Yeah.
movie, he brings a comb. They don't have the comb in the book, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so if you
Eventually,
didn't see him take food out there,
yeah.
wouldn't a reasonable mom, anyways, go, "Hey, he hasn't probably doesn't have any food, or I didn't see him take any food. I can go check if they need anything." You know what I
Right.
mean?
Or I haven't seen them all day. Maybe let's make sure they're okay.
Well, like, and unless they said, "Hey, we're gonna be," see, in the movie, they kind of explained that away a little bit, where they said they were gonna camp out in Vern's back lot and then go to a drag race the next day. So they
Yeah,
had a
that's
reason why they're to be gone for like not just overnight, but like the next most of the next day too.
yeah.
So they had kind of thought this out a little better in the movie version. In the book, which is like, "Oh, we'll just say that we're camping," and
Yeah.
like, but it's like a day and a half to get where you need to go, and then you're gonna be another day and a half back or something. So, like, they're walking quite a ways. They're walking to like a whole other town, but not a town right next to them, like through woods to like into another county.
Yeah.
So it's very brave and stupid and crazy what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things that I've always enjoyed, but like fascinated me, yet was like, what about this story is the very boyishness of it. You have, these 4 12-year-old boys or 13, 14, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Um, and like the amount of times they talk about all the jokes about their penis and random sex things and like all like the slang and like all the just everything. Like it always kind of cracked me up and was like, but this is like true of anything where they have a bunch of boys together in a movie or a book. This is how they talk. And I'm like, do
Right.
real men really, do real teenage boys really talk that way?
That's which not being a teenage boy and not having any teenage boys, I don't know. Like
I have teenage boys, but they're not regular teenage boys. They're LDS teenage boys, so they're far less likely to talk and act that way. But even them are like, "Oh, Yeah, there's some of that, going on, but like, I don't know. It's funny as a non-man.
And I like that they like in the book, I think it's also in the movie where he taught where they're camping out in the wilderness and they're talking about the things that seemed really important to them at that time.
Or
But
you
then
learn
he
about
makes
girls.
yeah, he makes the comment, and this is before we knew about girls, you know?
Yeah,
And so kind of that like, oh right, like the boys are like, yeah, ho ho, sex, I'm a big man. And you're like, you are scared of it. Or you know,
you
you
know,
don't
yeah,
yeah.
you're a child.
So yeah. But
Um, so yeah, what did this? Was there anything in particular that you really liked about the book?
really, because like I said, I don't really get in the head of boys very often. And the bad boy, Chris, the one that's just expected to be bad, and when
Yeah,
he
yeah,
kind of tells and he can't even say like, yeah, I stole the money and then I took it back. And so he does it like, maybe I did, and maybe I took it back. And like he's still processing the fact that this woman not only lied about him, but she stole it.
yeah.
And you know,
Let
and
him
he's
take
like,
the fall for it.
yeah, he's like, not only am I a bad person because of a thing that I ultimately tried to make up for,
Yeah, and try to undo. Yeah,
but she was the bad person and she put it on me. And he's the kid. He's learning from this. And so people are like, he's from a bad family. He's gonna be a bad kid. And it's like, well, are you from a bad family, lady? Because you're an awful person and you had the opportunity to make things better for him and you didn't. You made it worse.
mm-hmm.
And watching the boy or listening to, to the boy process that, like it's a way of thinking that is not my way of thinking. And so to have Stephen King be the man that is t expressing it through a boy's position, like I don't know, I to me that was just kind of eye-opening, I guess.
Yeah.
Like just thinking about something in a different way, you know?
I was gonna say, yeah, I thought that story is very interesting because it shows the disillusionment that like you have a certain expectation of adults at least, that adults at least because they're all grown up, they've got it together, that you can depend on them to do the right thing. And
Mhm.
then when they don't, and it's somebody in a trusted position like that, it's very shattering. Like there's something just unnerving about the idea that somebody who should be an example to you is taking advantage of a situation and the vulnerability of, the mistakes of a child, or, and I think a lot of people can sort of relate to that. They've had an adult disappoint them in that way or take
Yeah.
advantage of them in that way. And it's, it's shocking. Like it's sort of one of those things that it kind of makes you realize, oh, the world is messed up.
Yeah.
It's not just a few people. It's not just, kids just make mistakes. Grown-ups do too. And some grown-ups do it unabashedly. And I think maybe for Chris, it made him feel like, well, what hope is there for me if even the nice people do bad things
Right.
when they're growing up?
Right. And that's, I guess, because I tend to see everything through my perspective,
Hmm.
like I think of girls as being emotional. I kind of think of that, what's that? I think it's a John Mayer song, but the fathers be good to your
Yep,
daughters,
down there. Hmm.
And he's at one point he says boys will be strong and boys soldier on and you know and I've always loved that song, obviously. Like that's been a big deal in our house or whatever. However, when I'm reading it or when I'm watching the movie, that line came to my mind that like no no no, having that mentality actually is a negative thing for the boys, like you know what I mean, like
Hmm.
that's probably the kind of thing that that woman would have thought, that teacher or whoever, the school administrator, whoever it was that he gave the money to, like she probably thought like whatever, he's a messed up kid, it's not like his first time, it's not like it's going to be the last time, he's
Hmm.
not even gonna, this isn't even going to phase him, this is just who he is, boys will soldier on,
Yeah.
and kind of that like almost glib way of perceiving a teenage boy. Like, I'm not really the kind of person who's going to steal the money anyway. But
Yeah.
in other instances, in other situations, I might have done that at some point where I just assume like the boy is going to be fine. Boys are tough.
Yeah.
And sure, they're tough, but they shouldn't have to be like,
It doesn't mean they don't still feel something. Like,
right,
yeah, they may express their feelings in different ways. But yeah, that was the one thing that always bothered me about up until I had a daughter. And people always said, oh, you know, boys and girls are so different and girls are so emotional. Like boys weren't. And I'm like, my boys act like it's the end of the world every day over the dumbest things. They've always been emotional. They weren't not emotional. But then I had a daughter and I said, oh, they're just emotional in a different way.
right,
So they're still emotional.
right.
But
Well, and all of the
yes.
boys are like you watch Gordy,
Hmm.
um, just be complete like how emotionally, but I think he might be like the most like psychologically abused for
Hmm.
the parents to just be like, "Shoo, he doesn't exist. Even when Denny was alive,
Yeah.
he didn't exist. And then Denny dies, and all they have is Gordy, except he just doesn't exist. Like they almost resent him for existing. Like,
Yeah.
so he's got that, and then Chris has the bad family that just, for the most part, just shrugs and says, "Okay, guess we're bad," you know.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then,
they got a drunk father, and I didn't
yeah,
no idea what his mom's doing, or if he has a mom or where she.
yeah, she
But
seems to
like,
doesn't.
apparently just a big family of kids. Just oh yeah, that's right. In the book, it talked about how when the dad started drinking and got in a bad way, the mom would go visit her sister and leave
Oh,
the kids there.
yeah,
And then like his older brother was supposed to keep an eye on the kids, then he would just go run off with Ace and like the the big teenage bad boys
right,
instead of watching anybody.
right. And
But
then what was it? Who's I have Vern? Who's the other one? Who am I missing?
Vern, Chris, Teddy, and
Teddy.
Gordy. Yeah,
And Teddy is psycho because his dad,
he's psycho.
like he's a nut job, but what else is he gonna be? And
Yeah,
at one point, like when the garbage
yeah.
and he's like, "Whoa, your dad's crazy," and he's like, "Don't talk about my dad. He's a vet," and like he's
yeah.
like defending
He's
this
still
man.
on the beach of Normandy. What did you do? Yeah, like
Yeah, and you kind of want to say like, dude, I think one of the boys does kind of say like, why are you defending him, And because it's his dad. Because messed up might be the only thing he knows, but
mm-hmm.
you still love, like, like you
It's
still
still
have that.
it's still what he has. Like he doesn't have any other dad. And like
Right.
he's holding on to the good parts of his father's, why he's obsessed with military and all those things because he's holding on to those things his dad did. He was in the military. He was in World War II, and these are brave, honorable, good things. And so he's holding on to that stuff. He's
Yeah.
not holding on to the crazy stuff. And the thing
Yeah.
is, he knows darn well his dad is nuts. He knows darn well what his dad did to him was bad. But like he decided to selectively pick and choose what he wants to see in his father
Yeah.
because it's too hard to acknowledge that his father did that to him at a young age. It's too hard for him to accept that. Like, and for him, it's a survival thing for him that he just chooses what he can and he holds on to that.
Right.
And he's chosen to ignore it.
Yeah.
But then have somebody else like flat out to say it like that in such a rude manner. Again, an adult doing it. It's one
Right.
thing if it's another kid. Kids just say stupid stuff and they're rude and they're mean, But it's a kid. What's a kid know? But when it's an adult, flat out saying you're loony and your kids and you're the kid of a loony and blah blah blah, and like shoving all this horrible stuff back into his face. I'm like, the kid knows he doesn't need you to tell him.
Right.
And that's incredibly like rude and insensitive. And I get that he's frustrated and mad at the kids because they're trespassing. But as far as I can tell, all they did was take water. They didn't steal anything.
Right.
Why isn't the well why is the well inside the dump if you don't want people to use it?
Right. Yeah.
You know? And could they have come when it was time and like knocked and been like, hey, we want a drink? Would he even let them in? Or be like, no, get out of here, stupid kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know what the junkyard dumb guys deal is, but
Yeah.
I do love the whole thing that like in the book Corey's talking about how that Chopper was his first experience in like myth versus reality. Now everybody talked this dog up to be like this just killer dog, and it's just so huge, and we're gonna rip you apart to shreds, and almost reminds me of The Sandlot.
Yeah,
Or like the beast, and they keep imagining with this giant monster, and yeah, it's a big dog, but it's not like this huge dinosaur thing that they kept
yeah.
imagining.
I love the scene where it's just a dog's head that's like the size of the house.
And it catches the
I'm like,
no, exactly. So that's kind of like what they had in their head about this the dumb dog.
yeah,
And then they see him, and it's just a regular little dog. And so it's kind of like, huh, that's what we were scared of. Like, yeah, it would still hurt if he bit you in the balls.
right,
But it's a lot scarier when you're thinking of some kind of unseen monster thing,
right.
you know?
Yeah,
So I thought
yeah.
that was interesting.
I really liked having the boys' perspective. Like I can see each of those. I can see being accused of something that, and I can, but not only my own experience, but also a lot of what we read. Like a lot of the literature, at least that I've read, a lot of the books that we've read they they seem to be typically female centric, not always, but like
Hmm.
a lot of the dystopian stuff and a lot of the kind of newer stuff and then Little Women and it's
Hmm.
breaking down all of these different personalities, all women. And that's great for me, like to understand myself and my children better. But there's an entire half of the world that I'm not getting very deep. And so, and when it is a male that is the lead, of a story, it tends to be like he's
Harry
the
Potter.
hero or it's what's that?
Or like Harry Potter, where yeah,
Right.
he's a
Yeah.
boy, but there's enough female characters around, and it's not like a study in boyhood.
Right. Yeah. And so this was just to be able to watch boys process all of these different things.
Hmm.
Um, I just never had sat down and done it. And so at first I was like, coming of age 13-year-old boy or whatever, I'm like, Like, like this is gonna be weird. And then it was actually so interesting that I was like, wow, I am glad of my on my own, I never would have taken the time to experience that. I do want to say I could not find a physical copy to save my life, and so I was like, fine, I'll do the audiobook. I could not find a good version of the audiobook either.
Yeah.
So what I eventually found, I don't even remember, I didn't even write down who it was because it was awful. It was so funny. Like eventually I could block out the other stuff, but like you could hear like dogs barking. And when the boys in the story are in the rainstorm with a dead body at their feet, you hear a screen door close and a couple of steps behind the reader. I'm like, what?
Really? Wow.
It
That's
kept pulling me, it like pulled me out all the time. And sometimes he would be reading something and like you know how like if you're reading it and you have the wrong inflection,
mm-hmm.
but then it says he screamed or he said quietly. And so in your mind you can like switch that and make it whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just like reading it cold almost. And so he's like blah 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 blah. He screamed. You're like, oh. What?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I thought I'd find it on Audible, and I couldn't seem to find it. And then I searched for it and found it on Amazon as a paperback. And then, but as I was researching and finding that book, I saw an image of an audiobook version of it, and I was like, "Well, where is it? Why isn't it on Audible? Why couldn't I find it?" So I was
Yeah.
like, "Whatever." I already ordered the physical book. So what's
Yeah.
funny though is, real quick, I want to say.
Yeah.
Audiobooks have kind of ruined me for regular books now because I've gotten so used to being able to do five things at once, read a
Mhm.
book and wash dishes and do laundry and draw or exercise or go for a walk. I'm so used or drive and take my kids to and from school. I'm so used to listening to the audiobook while I do other things that it's made reading a physical book, what used to be my favorite thing in the world, very difficult. So it took me forever to finish this book because I was reading it physically.
So yeah.
I haven't done that in a long time.
Well, this particular audiobook, I found it on my desktop and it was for English readers or for people learning to read English. And so on the screen, it had the lines highlighted like as a book, as a like an ebook that it would highlight the lines as he was reading it.
Hmm, okay.
So I turned the volume down pretty low so I could kind of just barely hear him, but I was reading along with him as he was going.
Okay.
And I'm glad that I did that because it didn't pull me out so much so that those really emotional moments or those really like psychological like wow, I never thought about it that way moments. I didn't lose that because I was reading along and there was a man's voice in the background
Yeah.
saying what I was
Getting
reading, you
distracted
know.
by all the background noises that shouldn't have been there.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's cool. Um, I feel like as a book, it's a good story. There's a lot of deep things going on there, even though in a lot of ways it's a simple story, there's still a lot happening going on. And I
Hmm.
think all of the characters are very interesting. They're very well written. They all have their kind of their own personalities. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I remember I grew up with the movie.
Hmm.
So like I've been watching this since the 80s, and it was one of those go-to movies for me. I just really enjoyed the characters and the situation, and it was just fun. I think I like this movie almost as much as Now and Then, which is
No,
a girl-centered coming-of-age movie.
yes.
But it was always really fun. And, yeah, being a River Phoenix fan helped. And then, of course, I know, I'm going to write his name down here. I think it's Bill Wheaton. He
Will Wheaton. Uh-huh.
plays Gordy. I knew him from Star Trek, some
Yeah.
Next Generation. So I was like, oh yeah, it's him. So that was fun. And of course, there's Corey Feldman, who is, 80s child star royalty.
Yep.
So
Well, and
this
then
is probably one of
O'Connell.
his better roles too.
Yeah. Is it Jerry O'Connell?
Jerry O'Connell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jerry O'Connell is the fat kid.
Which is so
Vern.
funny because everybody calls him the fat kid, and I never saw this before. I forget what I saw him on later, and
Mhm.
everybody's like, "Oh, the fat kid from Stand By Me," and I'm like, "All right." And then as I'm watching this, like he is the fat one of the group, but I'm like, anymore, that doesn't even count as a fat kid. Like,
Yeah.
like he's a little bit thicker than the others, but like no
I
one
was
today
gonna tell
was
you.
like, uh-uh.
Yeah,
But
but it's funny to know that like, and I was putting this out to my sons when we were watching the movie. I was like, okay, now could you imagine looking at these four boys here? That the fat kid is going to be the good looking tall one, the best looking one out of them
yeah.
when they all grow up in real life. It's like, kid you not. And that's what's funny is, of course, that makes me think of the Family Guy spoof of Stand By Me. Because my husband's a Family Guy watcher. I watch some here and there. And they actually, like at the whole end when they've gotten back to the town after the whole adventure and they all kind of walked off. And like you know, the narrator Gordy says what happened to all of them as it got older. In the Family Guy version, he goes, he grew up and married a model. He married Rebecca Romay. I'm serious. I'm not even joking. Go look it up. The fat kid from Stand By Me married Rebecca Romay. Doesn't that just piss you off? And that's literally that's what it says. And it's like that is pretty funny when you think about it like that. That's hilarious. Talk about a glow up. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I knew Jerry O'Connell from a lot of shows like Sliders in like the 90s and a lot of different things, and I was a big fan of him as that. But it was like, I think it took me a long time to realize it was the same person because I had
Oh,
grown up with the Stand By Me, and I got to know Jerry O'Connell in like the 90s as
uh-huh.
he's gotten older and done more stuff. And then I think the day I figured it out that that was the same person, I was like,
Yeah.
it
Well, and
blew
I
my mind.
I did that a little bit with River Phoenix just because most of the stuff that I know of River Phoenix is him older and he's younger in this one and I can see it. Like once I was like, "Oh right, there he is." But I don't know, I didn't expect him to look exactly like that. Like I don't know, like
Mhm.
I don't know. Will Wheaton has looked like Will Wheaton since the dawn of Will Wheaton.
Yeah,
You know
and
what I
Corey
mean?
Feldman still looks like Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman just is
Right.
older-ish, but like
Right.
he's essentially looked the same since the beginning of time.
Yeah, yeah.
You
And
know?
so like watch the ones that I feel like you can look at and go, "Whoa, that's what you look like as a kid," or whatever.
Mhm.
Like to me, like that was like, "Oh wow." But But yeah, this is like an amazing cast. And Richard Dreyfuss does the voiceover.
And like grown up Gordy, yeah.
Yeah, which is funny because he doesn't do the acting, does he? Isn't it a different guy that is
No,
acting?
it's Richard Dreyfuss. He just looks different because he's younger and he has like
Oh,
reddish hair for some reason.
yeah, like that's what I was looking at that and I'm like, why do they have Richard Dreyfuss doing the voiceover but not acting? That's weird. But if
Yeah,
it's the
when you're
same
used to
guy,
seeing Richard Dreyfuss with gray hair, because his hair went gray pretty early on.
uh-huh.
Like not as early on as like people like Steve Martin, who was essentially born that way. Um,
Right,
but like, yeah, you're not used to seeing young him. Then
right.
it's kind of weird. Like, and there's some actors like I'm used to being a certain age. Like I see like young Anthony Hopkins things, I'm always a little weirded out. I'm like, I'm used to
Yeah,
him being like his 50s and 60s. That's where I saw him in movies the most.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I did the same thing with Maggie Smith, where I'm like, Maggie Smith has always been old. Like that, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure she was just born as a 65-year-old woman.
yeah,
And then
she's, she's lovely, but she's
yes.
always had like a certain
Well,
look.
then I saw pictures of her in her, I think it was early to mid 20s or something like that. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I forget that old people were once young, which is silly, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Was there anything that you really didn't like about the book?
To explain why I was about to give this criticism, it's one part of four because each novella has like a season. Like, so this is autumn, but there's like a spring, summer, fall, or winter. Um,
Okay.
the body is specifically for autumn,
Oh,
and
okay.
it felt incomplete to me. Like it didn't like it's fine that it's its own story, but it felt kind of like I didn't quite understand where I was and I don't quite understand where I'm going. Even though he does have the when we grew up, like
Yeah,
this is what happened and I'm the oldest one at what 34 or I'm the only one alive at
yeah.
whatever. And I like that's fine, but it felt like you weren't telling me the whole story.
Hmm.
And then I found out that it was only one part of a year basically, and I was like, oh,
Oh,
maybe
okay.
that's
I
where I
never knew that.
thought. So
I thought
now
it
we've,
was just his own little thing, and
yeah, I guess the others never got made into a movie. I don't know.
okay. I guess this was the best one. So I'll read
Yeah.
the other one sometime. Oh, so interesting random things from the book that I really liked that I didn't pick up from the movie. So I grew up with this movie. This was my first time reading the book. Um, I liked the whole thing that they pointed out that when they flipped for who was gonna go get the hamburger meat, like go with the food with like they had like 273 or something, like
Yeah.
and they went and bought like four sodas, like a pound and a half of hamburger, and
Or
like
bread and stuff. Like, yeah.
yeah, bread or something. And I'm like, for that much of money? Sorry, I know. Ah, the 2025 sucks for food buying right now, honestly. You couldn't even get a soda for that now.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's like $7, $8 for a pound of hamburger.
Yeah.
For a pound.
Yeah. I kind of love that though. I love seeing that. I kind of hate it when authors don't want to specify things. They don't want to be like $2.74.
Yeah, they
Like
don't want to like,
they're like we gathered our money and then we decided who was going to go. And they kind of skip how much it is. I
yeah.
love seeing that. I love seeing that you can get, nickel sodas or whatever. Like,
I know, how awesome a time. But then, people made less money too. So you gotta think about that. But I thought it was interesting though that they talked about how when they first flipped, they all had tails, and like the worm was like, "Oh no, that's a goocher. That's a
mhm,
goocher. That's a bad sign.
right.
That's a bad omen." And then when they flipped again, the other three boys all had tails, and Gordy had heads,
Hmm.
and the other three boys didn't live
Right.
to
Well,
grow up, but
they
didn't
didn't
make
mention
it
that.
to like middle age, and he did. And so
Right.
like it was sort of like touched on in the book that like looking back, he realized the significance of that situation. That
Right.
and if they had done things differently, would that not have happened? And did their outcome really have to do with that bad luck omen?
In the
Yeah.
movie, the other two, Chris is the only one that dies. The other two haven't died.
Yeah, they're just, off doing regular things. But
Yeah.
like in the book, they all died, but like in different kind of ways. And what's interesting is like the way. they died in the order in which they left at that day. Like when they come back and they all say goodbye,
Hmm.
Vern dies first, then Teddy, then Chris. And they
Hmm.
died in that order. And that's the order in which they left Gordy. So the one that was with Gordy the longest was the one that lived the longest. So I thought that was like very interesting too.
That is interesting. I didn't catch that, but I like it.
Yeah. So yeah, in some ways I liked it better having that they all passed away. That was a little more interesting. Yeah, sad, but I guess it seemed a little more impactful because then having Chris die, one he was the one he was closest to and he stayed close to for the longest, and having him be the last of those four guys, of the three other guys that he was friends with, that whole
Right.
experience happened with, be gone. Now he's the only one left. That's even
Right.
more impactful than just losing Chris. If the other two are already gone, it's like, whoa, I'm the other one left.
Right.
And now he feels like I have to tell the story if I'm the only one alive that was there or experienced it. So, yeah. So, movie? Jump to movie? Okay. So, interesting things about the movie. I've always loved this movie. I think the casting is awesome. I think, yes, granted, I grew up with these particular actors playing these parts,
Hmm.
but it was fun reading the book and going, yes, Corey Feldman is totally Teddy. Yes, Jay O'Connell was a great Vern.
Right.
Yes, River Phoenix, perfect Chris. And Bill Wheaton is a great Gordy. They all perfectly fit their roles and they did such good jobs.
Yep.
Like, honestly, these are kind of like Oscar worthy performances on almost
They,
everybody's behalf
right. They
of these
are.
boys. They all did really, really well.
Yeah. So I saw an interview um of Will Wheaton, and it's been like he's an adult when he has this interview. But he says, like, so his backstory on getting this job, he didn't want to do this movie. He didn't want to do it. And his mom was pushing and pushing and pushing, and she essentially he felt like he was a product of, like, his parents were like, we're going to create the next acting widget, you know? And so they pushed him, and he didn't want to do it. But when he was like, I think he said he was like 3 or 4, like he was very young when he first walked into a casting director, and basically he's like, I want to do what my mommy does because that's what mom had trained him to say.
Yeah.
And and so by the time he was doing this movie, he kind of hated it. He didn't want to do it. And they have he says, if you think about it, he's like, I am Gordy. My parents did not see me as their son. They saw me as what I can do for them. I was Will Wheaton acting doll, like
Hmm.
that was what he was there to make them better, or
Yeah.
to
Make
make them
money.
more
Yeah. Hmm.
right. And he's like, so I perfectly identified with Gordy, that his parents can just put him in a box and forget about him. He's like, that's how I felt. My
Yeah.
mother did not care about me. She cared about, did my son get the part, you know? And his dad was just there,
Yeah.
neither plus nor con, like. And then he's like, Corey has a messed up childhood. And River Phoenix, like, he also was kind of like Chris in that they just assumed he was the guy that, and then he
Yeah.
says, and then of
He's also
course,
from a family that was part of a cult at one point, and
right,
their family
right, he's
dynamic is interesting. When you like
right.
think about the whole Phoenix family, it's like, whoa.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. And he says, and then after River died, and everybody kind of just went, oh, well, we kind of knew that was gonna happen, and he was like, no, 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 you don't get to just throw him away like that. He's like, I
No,
understand people
like
aren't throwing him away, but it feels like it,
this wasn't even his fault. The way that he died wasn't even his
right,
fault. It was a
right,
messed up situation, and then everyone was like, "Oh, just another Hollywood actor,
right,
overdosing." It's like, no, somebody put something in his drink. Somebody
right,
actually killed him and murdered him. And for the longest time, they didn't talk about it like that. And I was like, wait a second. Why
right.
is this a bigger deal than it was? It was
It
so
almost
like just
it
quiet,
almost
like,
reminds
oh
me,
well, River's dead now.
right. Yeah, it almost reminds me of the like, oh well, if she didn't want to be raped, she shouldn't have worn the miniskirt. Like, it almost felt like that same kind of
Yeah.
like mentality. Oh well, he was living that lifestyle. So
No.
you can murder him? Like,
somebody
like, what are you
gave
talking
him
about?
something. Like he wasn't. Anyway,
Yeah. So it just, I
it's
don't
a
know.
messed up scenario, and it's one of those
Right.
things where like, why wasn't this ever a bigger deal? I think for the longest time I thought he actually did overdose, like
Right.
in a normal sort of a way, and
That's what
like,
everybody
that's not
thought.
a real story. And then I
Yeah.
found out the story, and I was like, wait a second, somebody poisoned him, somebody
Yeah.
killed him in
Yeah.
the club, and he just
And-
dies on the street outside, and like, why wasn't this a big deal? All
Right.
I knew was that he died, and it was like. Okay, Brad Pitt's gonna take over the part in Interview with the Vampire. That was the movie he was filming.
Right.
And I love Brad Pitt in that movie, don't get me wrong. But knowing it could have been River, I'm like, huh, that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
That could
But
have been
yeah,
really
so
interesting.
Will was and even Vern, Jerry O'Connell, like
Uh-huh.
so all of these boys are California um Hollywood babies, right? Like
Yeah,
all three of these others. And then Jerry was East Coast. I think he was New York or something, but he was East Coast. And so when he came in, he was not one of the guys, but he was one of the boys. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah,
and they weren't cruel to him. I also saw an interview that took place right after, like it was part of the like making of kind of special that they
yeah.
used to always do, and it was the three California boys, and they were all talking about how they were like, oh yeah, we can get together and we can talk, and they were talking about their things and joking and laughing, and they were genuine friends, right? And then they have Jerry O'Connell is separate. He's inside, he's in some other like location, and he's like, yeah, they were all really nice to me. I really appreciated that. And they all have their clique, they're all part of the same group and their families all run in the same circles, but they let me be part of it while I was there. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Vern. Like,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
kind
So
of sad.
they all really were the boys that they were portraying. That's why like when Teddy loses it about his dad, like Corey lost it about his dad, his family, his
Yeah.
situation. When Chris is crying, that was not in the script. It was not in the script for Chris to cry. But River Phoenix could not say those lines without crying.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of stuff, that made it even more impactful. The book was already impactful, and then knowing that this is so real, all of these boys experienced these things. Like I was like crying during the interview more than during the movie.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like that. It is very heartfelt, and you feel like it's really genuine, and you feel like there really are those characters.
Yeah.
So even though like you see them in other things and you see them other places, and they're in this role in Stand By Me, they are their own separate thing. They are these characters.
Hmm.
And I always really appreciated the magic these four actors brought to this story because their chemistry is the four of them,
Yeah.
and again, probably because they could relate to those characters, was just magical and made sort of elevated, you know, the material, which was already great, and elevated it to the next level.
Yeah.
So really awesome. Um, I also love Keith Sutherland as Ace. Oh my gosh. This is one of those roles that like one of the first roles I really noticed him in. And like he was that guy in like for the longest time. And then you add this to like movies like Lost Boys, who's also has Corey Feldman in. He essentially is playing that cool like guy, kind of scary, but
Yeah.
charming. But you don't mess with this dude. And like, oh, he's just so good. And like reading the book, I was like, yeah, this character that is that character, but they're barely like the older brothers and the gang and Ace and those guys, they're barely in the book.
Yeah.
They're briefly Teddy's older brother and Chris's older brother.
Hmm.
So Eyeballs and
I don't
Eyeballs
know.
Chamber and uh, Billy, or I don't know. Anyways, so Vern's older brother and Chris's older brother. Vern overhears his older brother talking to Chris's older brother about the body that they discovered while they had stolen a car and were off with some girls someplace that they couldn't possibly be because they don't own a car. They're like, how do we explain we were there? And they're like, well, just don't tell anybody that we found this kid's body. And the kid's been missing for like several days at
Mhm.
this point, right? So like everyone's heard about the story. Everybody's wondering where this kid is. So that's like the one brother's kind of like, I feel bad. Like we should do something, right? We should do something. And they're like, no, we'll get in trouble. They can track the call if you do an anonymous phone call or something, or, they're too scared to say anything. But like, that's when you see them in the book and you hear about the other people that they run around with
Hmm.
through stories and through everything. But then you don't see them again. Like, they're not actually in the story until the end. Like, he talks about how while we were doing this, it turned out like, it took them about 36 hours to spill their guts and tell somebody else in the gang. And then they told somebody else after swearing on their
Right.
mother's good name, they would never tell anyone. So apparently they didn't think that highly of their mothers.
Right.
And I love that some of the better lines in the book, even in the narration, are in the movie. That they
Yeah.
like just brought it on over. And you're like, yeah, that was one of the good lines. And it was fun hearing it again in the movie. But anyway, so then they show up at the end where they just barely finally got to the body and they after like a day and a half trek and going through all this crap, the four boys, and then they roll up like in their cars like, hey, what the heck? This is our
Yeah.
body. And it's like, okay. And it was fine in the book. That was fine. But I did enjoy how the movie decided to make it more cinematic. Plus
Yeah.
it sort of brings out the story more too. It gives us more actually movie length time period here. Um, they kept cutting back to the gang of boys
Right.
and showing like, the two boys that had found the body sort of struggle about like wanting to say something and not, and like their interaction with the other guys in the gang. And it gives a little more like insight into Ace and like the dynamic of these guys, right? And so it was interesting. We got to watch them play mailbox baseball. And they
Yeah.
destroyed people's mailboxes. I'm like, why are these kids? Oh, and they played like they're drag racing and like the ace guys playing turkey with the lumber truck coming forward and the lumber truck
Right.
like speeds off and dumps all the wood. And I'm like, why haven't anybody arrested these children yet? These boys are hoodlums. They're problems. Like, there are not enough cops in this town or something. Go get those guys. They're hoods. Anyways, and but yeah, like they showed a couple different things and them going back and forth and him convincing everybody to get in the car. Oh yeah, let's pretend that we were fishing and they're like, oh no, we won't go. It's like, okay, thank you for telling me that. So this is, what I want to say. Get the flip in the car,
Yeah.
and they're like, okay, okay. Like,
Yeah. Well, and
anyways,
it makes it all the kind of funnier that they're like, "Oh no, no, we don't want to have to answer to the cops about the car and everything." But if it was Ace, he'd have been like, "Yeah, I stole a car and I found a kid's body. What are you gonna do?" You
yeah,
know?
it was
Like,
what else? Yeah,
yeah,
like, he doesn't care. And so that was what's interesting. That made it more interesting and more of a build up in the movie. And I really appreciated that. It was one of those things where I felt like they did a really good job adapting the book and
yeah,
getting the heart of what the book was and the characters and understanding the subject, but then also kind of elevating it by having great performances and then adding a little more tension by adding those little spots, little
yeah,
things with the gang throughout.
yeah.
So
So
then you're like, it's building up and you're like, oh, what's going to happen when they both get there at the same time? What's going to happen?
yeah. So I did like the book element where like you're going along, you're focused on these boys, your whole world is in the woods right now, on the train tracks right now. Yeah, you got it. And all of a sudden you're like, what the deuce, Ace? Where did you come from? Because that's what the boys are experiencing, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I
yeah.
liked that in the book. And I also liked that it was like a crazy storm that came out of nowhere and they're drenched and they talk about how like ugh, like the hail is falling on the dead body and ugh,
Falling in
like
the kid's eyes and,
guys, yes, it's
uh,
so disturbing, but also it makes such an excellent like when you're in the story in your mind, like,
mhm.
oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then in the movie, that almost would have been too much. I actually appreciate, like you said, I appreciate that they were like, hey, don't forget about Ace over here. Hey, why are we thinking about Ace and his gang right now? Like, maybe you should pay attention. So then when you see him, you're like, oh, those jerks, right? And it
Mhm.
wasn't a storm, and it almost wasn't even about the body. Like that's both in the book, but especially in the movie. It's not even about the body. Like ultimately, you know, it's it's those boys having to prove themselves. And
Hmm.
in the book, it's called The Body. In the movie, it's called Stand By Me, and I loved that you might have been about to talk about this. Sorry if I steal your thunder here, but I loved that in the movie, it's Gordy with the gun. He stood by Chris. No one stands by Chris. No one stands up for Chris.
Hmm.
Gordy is the hero. He stood by Chris. And he was the one that's pointing the gun at Ace and being like, I don't care. If I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble. What does it hurt me to shoot you?
Yeah.
He's like,
One time you're
just
not going to get what you want.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a juvenile. So I
Yeah.
got this. You know,
And that's one
like
of the differences in the book where like it was Chris that got the gun out.
yeah,
And he said to uh Gordy, stand by me.
right,
Like stay with me. Don't leave me. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere. Because
right.
Vern and Teddy ran off. When things like started hailing and started getting scary, they took off. In the movie, they got chased off by, Vern's older brother or something. And so then it's just those two. But like I do like that that is a better name for the story. The Body is fine, but Stand By Me, it really does kind of say a lot about what the story is really about. It's really about the people that you stand up for, the people that you remember the rest of your life. Even if they aren't your best friends the rest of your life, they were important to you at a time that was most pivotal, and so they become an important part of who you are because they stood with you. They were with you in a scary moment. And that's very profound. But
Yeah,
yeah, so it would have been really hard to have done that whole scene with rain and hail.
yeah,
And like I get that like as literature, as a novel, that's very like atmospheric and interesting to have all this tumult of crazy stuff happening right on top of all the action. But at the same time, it works just fine without it in the
yeah,
movie.
yeah. I
Just
like
the
it better as
tension
it.
of the scene and like the situation is enough. You don't need the rain, you don't need the hail. And so I appreciate that they
Mhm.
didn't try to do that because it would have been a lot.
Yeah,
And it would have been like, how would you have heard what anybody was saying with that kind of like it's not a light downpour, it's like a serious storm going on,
right.
So I don't know, I thought that was great. And yeah, like having Gordy be the one that grabs the gun, that's a good move too, because he is essentially the lead character and he's taking control for the first time, where he's been kind of sort of blasé this whole time and kind of like he may not realize it that he's been saying his parents are kind of sleepwalking through life, but so is he.
Hmm.
And he hasn't completely realized it up until now that he's sort of been like so in the movie he's closer to his brother Denny than he is in
Yeah,
the book. In the book he's like, yeah, I cared about him and like I loved him, but he was so much older than me. It was kind of like the uncle that came to visit. Like
right.
he treated me better than my parents did, but I missed him at the same time I didn't know him. Whereas
Yeah,
in the movie they were close and like Denny was the one that was, supporting him in his writing, was trying to include him in everything and really cared about him. And I enjoyed that and I liked that better in the movie because then you feel all the more for him because he had that person in his family and that person is gone.
yeah.
And like at the same time, like he may feel horrible that his parents don't see him, but Denny was the glue. Denny
Mhm.
probably made all the people in that family feel important,
Yeah,
feel like they mattered. And that was the kind of personality he was. So then and Gordy's just not realizing, yeah, his parents aren't paying attention to him. But how much attention is he paying to his parents either?
yeah,
Like, is he going out of the way? Or is he just purposely going off of his friends to not have to deal with it either?
right.
And like he's
Well,
probably not seeing that, but he is. He's sleepwalking through it too.
yep,
He's also not dealing with it.
yep. He doesn't have the responsibility that his parents do have to make it better, but also if he's old enough to recognize that it's happening, he's old enough to start making better choices. And you see him grow up, because Chris is kind of the leader of this group, and
Mhm.
and you see, especially in the movie, I think more so than in the book, you
Mhm.
see Gordy be like, not only am I going to be my own person, but I can do for you. I can take the lead. You don't always have to be the strong one. And I liked that. I liked seeing it matter, if that makes sense. It
Yeah.
suddenly mattered to Gordy. I like that.
Yeah. And I like that in the movie, he actually talked about like his brother when they found the dead body before everybody else showed up. And like they were able to have that moment, just the two of them, because the other boys were looking for stuff to make a litter so I can carry the body off. And because in the book, they don't actually have that, they don't say that out loud, that like part of why he's so obsessed with seeing the body because he hasn't fully dealt with his brother's death. And because, in the book, um, he had a dream about, there's a couple different dream things he talked about in
Yeah.
the book. We only saw like the story that he wrote, that he tells around the
I hate
campfire.
I hate that, by the way. The pie story. Oh, I hate the
It's
pie.
such a boy thing though to come up with. And like I always thought it was funny, but at the same time totally gross. I hate throw up in movies.
Yes.
Can't watch it. It's very over the top, silly throw up, but still it's like it's very gross.
I
But I
can't
can
handle it.
see why it would appeal to boys. And like my husband even said, like when he first saw it, he thought it was the funniest thing ever. But since, he was like he snuck upstairs to watch it in the middle of the night when he wasn't supposed to. And he was trying to be quiet at the same time while he was trying while he's watching the movie, and then that scene comes on, and he's trying not to laugh, which made it even funnier because he's trying not to laugh. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds hilarious. And then I watched it later on older, and I was like, I don't like that part. Like, why did I think that was funny? I'm like, you were probably really immature at the time you saw it, so it was funny.
Right.
Time, but yeah, I like it for this for the what it shows about Gordy and how the boys react to it. So it's fun, and I understand why they kept that story. Like
Yeah.
the other story they shared earlier in the book, where it was like Poppy something he wrote in college. It's kind of like, but even he says it's pretentious and like it's very negative towards women, and clearly I was inexperienced and I don't know what I was doing, and like it was icky. But at the same time, you didn't get that he was trying to show, hey, I'm a writer, and
Right.
like he was over trying to describe things and over dramatize things. But like it's not bad, but you can see like he's trying to show how he's grown as a writer, that he realizes now he doesn't have to do that.
Right.
And it's cool in the book, but it's not necessary at all to the story. So it makes sense they got rid of it. Um, then the dreams. Do you want to talk about the dreams that are in the book?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. You take that on.
Well, yeah, so I love like the first of all, we talked about this in Jaws. Water frightens me. Like not actual water, but when I can't see under the water or it's like a natural body of water and things live in it, that already terrifies me.
Things.
And then he has this dream where who was it? Was it the boy, his friends that were pulling him down, or like the
It's like Vern
corpse?
and Teddy are like pulling Chris down, and Chris is reaching out to him, begging
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, and then at the very end of the dream, what wakes him up is he feels something grab onto his ankle or whatever, and then he wakes up and it's the kid waking him up for his turn to take the watch.
Yeah, yeah. And like
Oh,
in the book, sorry, so this reminds me of that same night where they're camping out.
uh-huh.
First off, they don't have a tent, which I think would have been smart, but maybe that wasn't as normal to have a tent back then. Maybe not everybody had tents. They took bedrolls too, so they didn't have like sleeping bags, they had bedrolls. So,
Right.
anyways, they don't have a tent. So they're out there in the middle of the woods, and then they start hearing this horrible sound and like freaks everybody out. And I know exactly the sound they're talking about. And the way it was described, I was like, I totally know the sound they're talking about. And a lot of people have like reported this kind of sound in the woods. Some people believe it's Bigfoot. Some people believe it's some kind of spirit. But it's like this wailing woman cry sound. Like in the movie, they represented it as wolves or coyotes. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's not as scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get the fear in the moment. You still be scared of coyotes. But like the way they describe it in the book was so much more terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, like bone chilling, like I'm never sleeping again. Kind
Yeah.
of like, what were you thinking coming out here by yourself? Nobody knows where you guys are. Whatever that is could get you.
Yeah.
Anyways, it made me think Blair Witch Project. in like the worst possible way. Anyways, okay, so then there's that dream. Was there another dream?
There was another dream, but I don't remember it as well.
Oh, so like he was talking about how like he would see. So part of the story that he wrote, the one that was all pretentious and everything, he talked about the character in the story, his brother died in like a car crash or something, which is interesting because his brother in the story and like Gordy's brother died in a car crash too. And in like Gordy's imagination in real life, he was afraid to go in to his brother's room because he was afraid his brother, he'd look over and see his brother in the closet all mangled and messed up and saying something like, it should have been you, or,
That's right.
all mangled. And so he put that into his story in college where the character like imagines seeing his dead brother in the doorway or the closet being like, what are you doing in my room? And get out of my room, or blah blah blah, and all like mangled and everything.
Yeah, you're right.
So that was interesting. And again, I see why they didn't use it in the movie. Not necessary, but cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So also that part where they're camping and they're having the rough night and they hear the awful sounds and what. Okay. In the movie, I think it's Vern when he taking his turn at watch and he has the gun. He's like, he's like,
It's like, I
oh
hope that's not loaded. Seriously,
my
do not
gosh.
trust that child with a gun.
I was
It's kind of
laughing
powerful gun.
so hard, but I was also like, yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, someone's gonna die right now. But
He's
it
gonna
made
put
me,
off. Yep.
I cracked up so hard at that.
Yeah. So watching this with my boys, they hadn't seen it before. I watched this with my two movie educated children. Um, and they were the same thing. They were like, no, 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 he's gonna kill somebody. He's gonna wake somebody up and shoot him. But yeah, then you had Teddy in the movie. Teddy's all like pretending he's like in the military and he's like in one of those stories. And they're like, oh, shut up, Teddy. You're trying to sleep. And like I love that. I thought that was good. And yeah, then you have that whole scene with Chris and Gordy where Chris tells him about
Yeah.
everything. Um, so yeah, like as a movie, I think it's a really good adaptation of a
Mhm.
book. I think it's very nostalgic for me. It's I grew up with it, but I think it's also a great representation of the talent of those four actors. And I honestly do think this is Corey Feldman's best part. I love him as a comic actor, and a lot of things that he did in the 80s were comedic. I feel like this showed that he had talent beyond that and that he could do something serious and he could really act.
Yeah.
And I think I wish there'd been more of that for him as he went on in his career. I don't think there was nearly enough of those kind of parts.
Yeah.
But so crazy thing I saw online when I was going through stuff is that apparently Corey Feldman was originally supposed to play the part of Gilbert in Gilbert what's eating
What
Gilbert
would you give
grapes. He was supposed to play Leo's part,
Oh,
and he was originally meant to be in that part. But Johnny Depp didn't like him and told like the director that he didn't like him, and he thought, he's druggy and blah blah blah, which was weird because literally Johnny Depp was hanging out with River. They were
right.
buddies, and River died in Johnny's establishment, or
Yeah.
that's where he was. Like, he's at the Viper Room when he got drugged and then died. So, like, it's a little hypocritical for him to judge Corey because Corey was actually getting clean at the time and he was sober at the time. So, like, yeah, he had a drug problem, but he didn't feel like that was fair, and so he got kicked out of the part. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
horrible.
Which I can see if you're like, listen, I'm a problem. I'm trying not to engage with problems. He's a problem. Keep him away from me. But also, yeah, that I I always think it's weird when an actor, no matter who the actor is, you're the actor. Unless you're also a producer or something, like
Hmm.
shut up and do your part. Like I know that that's like a very glib way to say it, but it just bothers me. It drives me insane when it's like, oh, I won't work with them, so get somebody else. Even if I love the actor generally, it's icky to me. It's weird.
Yeah, yeah. I can get that at the same time though that there would be people that you wouldn't want to work with. Like if I ever do get to make films someday, like I would want to, there are certain actors I will not work with. I would not cast in anything that I ever
Right.
directed or anything, you know what I mean? Because I do not care for that actor. I do not care for that person. And I'd be like, no, I'm not gonna do it. And my husband, of course, is always like, well, what if, like, the studio only make the movie if, like, you cast this person or blah, blah, blah. And because he's always asking me these kind of questions. And I'm like, but no. Like, seriously, like, the art is more important to me than
Mhm.
money. And he's like, what are you talking about? What if it's millions of dollars? I'm like, my soul is not for sale.
Right.
My art is not for sale. I will make, like, I don't know, he's always asked me these questions. So I'm like, if you could option your book to be a movie, but you had no control over it, you had no say in casting,
Yeah.
you had no say in the script. I was like, heck no. I don't
That's
care
a
what kind of
pretty,
money they offer me. I wouldn't do it.
he knows he spent the last 20 years married to an indie artist, indie author. Like,
Yeah.
oh, but I'll sell out for the movie. Like, no.
No, no. Why would I do that? No. So, anyways, I don't know why that came up.
That's funny.
Yeah, because sometimes actors don't want to work with each other, and
Which,
sometimes there's a legitimate reason that people are this way, and sometimes it's
right,
not. Sometimes you're like, they had no right to do that.
right.
But you hear stories of this all the time in movies.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that when we're talking about Gilbert Grape, which we don't have to go into that, but also that may be my favorite Leonardo DiCaprio performance that I've ever seen him do. So, I mean, Corey Feldman might also have been amazing,
Yeah, he might have been. Yeah.
but that was a ace in the hole right there.
So, like, another example of this is originally it was supposed to be Natalie Portman that was supposed to play Juliet in the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet with Leo.
Oh,
And I
I
would
had
love to have seen that movie. I'm not a Claire Danes fan, especially in that movie. There's things she's done that I think she is good in. I did not like her in that. I thought she was awful. And the rest of the movie I think is great. She's the only thing I don't like about it. So imagine Natalie Portman in that part. And I think Natalie Portman's amazing and that she pretty much doesn't do anything bad. So, wow. But, for whatever reason, it worked out the way it did.
yeah,
You can't really go back in time and like get the movie you want. That's not
right.
how it works. You get what you get. So,
Which is kind of extra handy that Stand By Me happens to have the right people.
yeah.
And I love Dreyfus's voice. I don't know why. Like I was talking about that with the audiobooks. That sometimes there's certain voices that I'm like, "Yes, you
This
can
is
read
the
me the phone
person.
book."
Mhm.
Like. And I don't he's not always right for everything, but I like him in narration, especially in nostalgia or reflective narration. I
Mhm.
like his voice. That
He's
was
got a good
perfect.
voice for it. Yeah. He does. I don't buy him as Gordy grown up, but
No.
that's okay. I'll forgive it because it's Richard Dreyfuss and
Yeah.
his voice is so iconic and I can't separate the two. Of course, I grew up with it. But yeah, like I think if I did listen to an audiobook, I would want it to be Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah.
The
That'd be
whole thing.
awesome.
That would be amazing. That'd be a great audiobook. But anyways, so that's Stand By Me. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the movie or the book?
I don't think so. I was going to mention, I did write down when I was doing the research into the making of that apparently a bunch of people were like, ew, coming of age boys dumb. Like people were not into the movie and um I don't remember if it got canned at one studio and moved to another, or if it was just like back burner stuff and then eventually they got to it. I don't remember exactly how that worked. However, it ended up making more than 6 times its budget at the box office.
So it's like those people that are like, oh, ew, no one's gonna watch this. They were off the mark.
Everyone wanted this because it's different from what everything else was. Everything else was a certain thing. And then it inspired tons. Like on the short list was Sandlot, Stranger Things, Now and Then. But it inspired a whole new genre because this was something that was in books
but
there
not
were
film
coming of
so
age books,
much.
but yeah, movies were not, up to that point. We're not really focusing on coming of age stories.
Mm,
And this, when the studios looked around and went, holy crap, everybody wants this. They started actually, and now it is a solid genre.
yeah.
So
No, that's cool. That is really cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome. So, yeah, cool. So, Ray, this was my book. What are we doing next time?
so um I'm going to torture you a little bit, maybe, because I really, really want to do Gone with the Wind.
Oh my gosh, I love,
It's a long one, but I really want to do it. And
I
I've
love.
had it on my list since the very beginning, and I've never actually pulled the trigger, and I just want to.
So, have you read this book?
No, I have read part of it. I started it twice. I've never finished it.
Seen the movie.
Oh yeah, the movie
Okay,
I've
okay.
seen.
I love Gone with the Wind. I love the book. I also love the sequel. I forgot the name of the author that did Scarlet, and they did a
Uh-huh.
mini series of it. Absolutely flipping love that. I
Yep.
love Scarlet O'Hara. And interesting little factoid for you. Um, Gwen is kind of my Scarlet. Gwen in my story is kind of my Scarlet O'Hara, and the character you meet in the third book, Isla Blackwell, is kind of her Melanie.
Oh, okay.
So interesting. If you understand who those characters are in the book, you'll get what I mean.
So sweet.
But anyways, cool. I love Gone with the Wind. So you're not torturing me. You might be torturing some of our followers that are like, oh man. Well, I
It's
guess that's
it's
probably what's interesting about our little podcast here is we do all sorts of different stuff. We're kind of
yeah,
just jumping everywhere. We do literature, like classics, and then we do you know,
Divergent.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I was
kids'
gonna say,
books and whatever.
I'm also the one that gave us a 16 page, what was that? The Headless Horseman one?
Yeah, yeah.
How Yeah.
Yeah, so short stories aren't off the table either because
Yeah, that was like 16 pages.
it's all about the adaptations. That's what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
And the beauty of what books can inspire,
Yeah.
even like small subject matters, like short stories can create endless works,
Hmm.
inspire so much. So very cool. All right, so I'm excited for that. Love a good Gone with the Wind. And so that's next time. So for Paperback Flicks, I am Ruth Craddock,
I'm Ray Davidson.
and we'll see you guys next time for Gone with the Wind.